Hello buddies, welcome back to yet another episode in our channel. So in today's video we are gonna see about metering modes. So we are going to discuss about the three metering modes in all DSLR or mirrorless cameras, and we are gonna see why those metering modes are really gonna help you. So before starting, if you are new here, I am Carrio from India. We talk photography, filmmaking, editing and many other social media stuffs that help creators like us. So yes guys, if you're new here, do hit that subscribe button and click on the bell icon to get regularly notified whenever I make a video. And yes, without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Hey guys, welcome back. So today is yet another learn photography basics video. I have made a special playlist to learn photography. So this is kind of a beginner playlist. If you're a beginner or just starting in photography, this playlist is really going to help you a lot. From the basics you can learn photography. So this is one such episode of that playlist where we are going to discuss about metering modes. So before that, as I have said in my previous videos, a good image is out of a good exposure. What is exposure? Exposure is the amount of light that is in an image. So this exposure really depends upon three factors, which are the ISO, aperture and shutter speed. So I have made separate videos for all these three. If you want to learn more about them, just check this playlist. Apart from these three, the main thing that is really going to help these three things to determine the exposure or to determine the light on your subject is called a light meter. So generally if you see in films, light is actually measured with light meters. So guys, if you see some of the behind the scenes of some actual filmmaking, these guys will have some machine or tool kind of thing in their hand. So if I am the subject, someone else will be standing near me and will be holding that tool. And that tool is called as light meter. It actually measures the light that is falling on the subject. So based on that light, the settings will be made on the camera. So in similar way, we are not actually having a light meter here. So every time you take a camera, you cannot have a light meter with you. And that's why we have light meter in our camera. So those meters are really going to help you find the right exposure for an image. In actual filmmaking, they have a light meter which detects the light. So those kind of light meter is just gonna record the amount of light that is falling on the subject, while the light meter in our camera is gonna detect the amount of light that is being reflected from the subject. So this is the main difference between those kind of light meters and the light meter we have in our DSLR camera. So I hope you got an idea what this light meter actually does. It's gonna measure the amount of light that is being reflected from the subject, and based on which it's gonna help the ISO, aperture and shutter speed to decide on the exposure of the image. So that is what actually happening here. So I hope you just understood the basics of how a light meter works. Now let's move to the types of meters on a DSLR camera. So basically if you see, we have three kinds of meters that's actually present in this kind of DSLR or mirrorless cameras. So those are matrix or evaluative metering. The second one is center weighted metering. The third one is spot metering. So now let's elaborate all these three metering modes and let's see how these kind of metering modes are going to help you to capture the best image. So guys, let's start with the matrix or evaluative metering. So the word matrix, have you heard it somewhere? Probably in max in your school days, right? So what actually comes into your mind when I say matrix? So matrix is something like 2 by 2 or 3 by 3. So it's basically grid kind of thing, right? A11, A12, A21, A22. Do you remember those max memories? So it's basically a grid kind of thing. That's it guys, you are done with it. So matrix metering is a process by which the meter is gonna divide the frame into a grid of frames. So for example, if you consider this frame in evaluative metering, this meter is gonna just divide this frame into grids. So this number of grids being divided in a matrix metering is gonna vary with cameras and models, etc. So for example, just consider that this frame is just divided into 9 equal grids, Then in evaluative metering or matrix metering, what actually happens is, for each frame, the amount of light that is being reflected from the surface is being noted and takes the average from each grid and just put up an average amount of exposure that is required. So that's how matrix or evaluative metering works. And one more thing to be noted here is, like in some of the new DSLR, not only that the average of these exposure of the grids is being noted, but also the importance is given to the place where focus is made on the camera. For example, if the subject is me and the focus is on the center grid, more importance is given to the center grid to calculate the average exposure. So that's how matrix or evaluative metering works. So now let's move to the center weighted metering process. So as the name says, in this process of metering, the more importance is given to the center part of the frame. So probably the corner of the frames are actually not even considered. So in this center weighted metering mode, many of the pro or high-end DSLR cameras allow you to just adjust the diameter of the center, and that option is not available in small cameras like this. So yes, based on the center portion of your frame, the exposure is being set in this meter mode. So moving on to the third meter mode, which is spot metering. So in spot metering, the meter is going to measure light only from a particular spot where the camera is being focused. So it is actually 5 or 10% of the frame that is being just calculated to amount the measure of light. So in this metering process, apart from that spot, none of the frames or none of the portion of the frame is being actually used to calculate the light. So that's how spot metering actually works. So only 5 to 10% of the frame is actually considered to measure light. From some of the mid-range to high-end DSLRs, you can just adjust the spot from which you need that light to be measured. While in basic DSLRs, you don't have that capacity or ability to adjust the spot where the light is actually being measured. So if you see, this is very accurate metering and it just gives precise readings from that small spot in your frame, and hence it's more effective in high contrast situations. Let's now do some practical experiments. I'm just going to keep my camera in auto mode and let's see how the camera behaves for different metering modes and how it changes the exposure, that is the values of ISO, aperture and shutter speed. So first we are going to have a evenly lit frame. So I have the window light here falling on my face. So it's actually evenly lit. Let's see how these three metering modes work in this kind of a situation. So if you see, in this kind of a situation, all the three metering modes works more or less the same. Only the center weighted metering mode works are quite different, where its shutter speed is quite high. It's 1/30th of a second, while the other two metering modes are 1/25th of a second. So in evenly lit conditions, all these three metering modes work more or less the same. So now we are going to see a different situation where the subject is underexposed and you have extreme backlight. Now let's see, with the amount of light that is actually falling on my face, let's see how the three metering modes actually work. So if you see, it's quite different here. In the evaluative metering, though the image is underexposed, we have some amount of light on the subject, that is exposure values are automatically changed based on the evaluated metering done on the frame. While in center weighted metering mode, only the center spot is being measured for light. So if you see, in the center part, half of the frame is dark and half is filled with the backlight. This fools the camera and hence you have very underexposed image in center weighted metering mode. Moving on to the spot metering mode, the spot metering mode has worked actually very good. You have at least a decent amount of light on the subject's face. So while comparing this situation of extreme backlit, the spot meter works comparatively better. Although all these three images are quite underexposed, of the three metering modes, the spot metering mode has worked better. So we have now made a comparison between all these three metering modes on how it works in real world. I hope that was clear. So now let's move to the main question you all have in your mind. Which metering mode should I use and when should I use it? So now let's look into that. So to start with the matrix metering. So a matrix metering is generally considered when you have a good lit frame. That is, you have good amount of light on your frame. You're just gonna capture a go-to image, just grab the camera, just gonna take an image. In those kind of conditions where you have good amount of light, go with the matrix metering, and yes, you can just blindly rely on it. It's gonna give you good results. Now moving on to the center weighted metering. So when to use the center weighted metering mode? This metering mode is generally used when you want the main subject that is at the center to be properly exposed and you're not much worried about all the other things on the frame. Then you can just go for this kind of metering mode. So yeah, just use this center weighted metering mode for outdoor portraits, high contrast images, or product photography and food photography. Kind of. That's all about the center weighted metering mode. Now let's move to the spot metering mode. So as I said earlier, the spot metering mode is going to give you more accurate and precise exposure control. So it's generally preferred for backlit objects, or if you're going to shoot some close-up shots, or if you're going to do some macro images. So for these kind of things, go with the spot metering where you have more accuracy and more precise control of the exposure. This mode can be used to read even the brightest and the darkest zones of a landscape. Even you can use this mode for lunar photography. So yes guys, this spot metering is gonna work exponentially better when the subject is actually much brighter or much darker than the surroundings. So guys, along with these meter modes, you have to use the exposure compensation in order to just compensate the exposure. For example, at conditions like where you have enormous amount of snow, your camera may work in a way like the image is totally underexposed. At these situations, you may have an exposure compensation of +1 to match that underexposed image. In a similar way, when you're just capturing an image where it's total of dark, for example, if someone is wearing full dark clothes, or you're gonna just take an image of a black teddy bear, at that time the image may be overexposed, and hence you must use the exposure compensation -1 to just match the exposure. So that's how metering modes and exposure compensation should be used together to achieve the best results. That's it about the metering mode guys. I hope you clearly understood what these three metering modes actually does in our DSLR cameras. I hope this video was helpful. If yes, do hit that like button and let me know in comments what all videos you want from me. And guys, if you're new here, just hit on the subscribe button. That will be phenomenal and a great support for me. Sorry that my throat is bad today. We'll meet you in another video. Until then, it's your Carrio signing off.